Let's talk about how we are going to increase your traffic and profit with Pinterest to your Etsy shop. I'm Emily Vales. I'm a Pinterest marketing expert and coach. And for almost 5 years now, I've helped my clients and my students increase their traffic and turn it into profit through the power of Pinterest marketing. So when we are thinking about Pinterest, the first thing that we need to establish is that Pinterest is a visual search engine. So a lot of people like to classify Pinterest as social media. They just kind of lump it in with Instagram and TikTok and Facebook. However, it actually functions to its core very different than those other platforms. Now, I do want to share the disclaimer that these social media platforms such as Instagram and TikTok, they are continually becoming more focused on SEO. And SEO stands for search engine optimization. And what that means is that it's important to utilize keywords and titles, descriptions, and text overlay because these platforms are becoming smarter essentially by the day. And it's really great because with these platforms becoming more intelligent, they're creating a better user experience and helping people see more of what they want to see. Now, one thing that still really separates Pinterest from the social media platforms, yes, TikTok, Instagram, they are becoming more focused on keywords. However, people still go to social media platforms to be social. Of course, they're amazing tools and it's an amazing resource for business owners to utilize social media to grow their presence, obviously grow their sales. But when people go to social media, a lot of times they're going there to be social. We get kind of stuck in that rabbit hole of watching Instagram Reels, watching TikTok videos. And of course, it does influence a lot of our buying decisions because sometimes we go to social media platforms and we have no intent of thinking, okay, I'm going to go to Instagram to shop. Now, some people may, but a lot of times we are just going there for entertainment or to learn even, but we kind of get sucked into that. And then whether it be targeted ads or the posts that they see we're interacting with, we see more of that content. And a lot of times people do buy from social media, hence why it's so powerful for business owners. But one thing I want to share is when people are using Pinterest, because it is a visual search engine, users go there, or we could refer to the Pinterest user as the pinner. Pinners go there with a different intent. And that makes it very different than social media. It also makes it such a powerful tool for business owners. So when pinners go to the platform, a lot of times they go there with a problem and they're actively looking for a solution. So I like to call this the Pinterest sales funnel. But what happens is when the pinner goes to the platform, they have this problem. Maybe it's they need a dinner recipe. They need help with this week's DIY project. They're planning the baby nursery. They're planning the wedding. It's a very positive and fun platform, but it's helping people plan for really big life moments. And because they are going there with a problem and they're actively looking for a solution, a lot of times they might have a problem in that moment that they need a solution to immediately, like I mentioned, tonight's dinner recipe. But a lot of times they also are planning for the future. So it's so powerful because even if the pinner doesn't take action on your product or your content right away, they have this ability to save that pin to specific boards and come back to that later. And it's really informing their buying decisions. So back to the way that Pinterest works in that sales funnel. And I want you to be thinking about, okay, this is how it's going to benefit my Etsy shop. So when the pinner comes to the platform, they have this problem. So typically the first step in that Pinterest sales funnel is they're going to the search bar and typing in that problem they have, and they're actively looking for a solution. What they're typing in that search bar, those are keywords. And what those keywords do, they connect that pinner to solutions to their problem. And those solutions are essentially laid out or provided through pins. So Pinterest is so cool because it is a visual search engine. Keyword there being the visual piece, where we're seeing these beautiful pins that offer different solutions. And the pins they could all be solutions to our problem. So then the pinner, once they see those pins come up, they're trying to decide which one is going to provide the best solution to their problem. So there's a couple of different actions they could take. They could scroll, so they could actually just scroll right by your pin. They could click on your pin and save it for later, which a save is an important metric because that indicates to the Pinterest algorithm that your content is high quality and people are wanting to come back to that later. Or they could also actually click through to your website because those pins are linked. And what that is doing is driving people off of Pinterest to wherever you want to direct them to. So that could be to your blog, that could be to your products, that could be to a landing page, wherever you are wanting to drive that traffic. I even drive some of my pins to my YouTube channel because I am offering solutions to people's problems through my YouTube channel. Now, little side note here, when you are driving people to a platform that you don't own, such as YouTube, I don't own YouTube, right? That's not my domain. I have a channel on YouTube, yes, but the domain I own is actually emilyvales.com. I purchased that domain. I have to pay for it yearly. So when I drive pins to my website, they are actually indexed differently. That means they are saved differently by Pinterest than pins directed to a platform I don't own. When you are directing pins to Etsy, you, yes, have an Etsy shop, but you don't own Etsy.com, right? That's not a domain you own. So you can't go in the back end of Etsy and claim that domain. So when you drive pins to Etsy, yes, you can drive people to your collections, to specific products, to your shop, but those pins are going to be indexed a little bit different, which is important to know. However, that doesn't mean that Pinterest still can't be an amazing platform for your business, which is why we're here today to talk about how we are going to increase your traffic and profit through Pinterest to your Etsy shop. So I just kind of wanted to explain that and how Pinterest really works so you can think about, okay, this can be a really powerful way for my Etsy shop to be discovered because 97% of searches on Pinterest are unbranded. You don't need to be Peloton or Target or one of these huge brands in order to increase your traffic and sales. People just want the perfect solution to their problem. And I've bought invitations off of Etsy. I've bought personalized jewelry, and I have found it from Pinterest. So even though I know I mentioned that your pins are indexed a little bit different when you're driving them to your Etsy shop because you can't confirm that domain the same way as if you were driving them to your website, it still is an amazing way to drive traffic to your shop because when people have that problem and you're offering them this perfect solution, they are ready to buy. So when we're thinking about Pinterest, people of course are going to be at different points in their buyer's journey. Sometimes they're just gathering ideas and information. Other times they're going to be at the bottom of the funnel where they are ready to make that purchasing decision. So back to how we're going to get started on Pinterest for your Etsy shop. And maybe you've used Pinterest in the past, maybe even dabbled with it, but it continues to change and evolve, and you know that you kind of need to get back on track. I want you to take this information and apply it to your business on Pinterest so that you can start getting results, no matter if you're needing to start from scratch or if you're needing to revamp that Pinterest strategy. So the first thing I always recommend, and I think that sometimes this is skipped over or overlooked, really the first thing you need to do is you need to do in-depth keyword research for your business on Pinterest. Now, I have lots of different YouTube episodes about how to do keyword research on Pinterest, and obviously you can apply that to your Etsy shop and whatever your niche may be, but you're going to want to have this working document where you're keeping track of all of the pillar keywords, which are 1 to 2 words, and also long tail keywords, which are typically 3 to 5 words. You're going to want to have a working document that you can refer back to because what people are searching for on YouTube or Google, it's different than Pinterest. Pinterest is very unique. So there might be a little bit of crossover, but you're going to want to start fresh and have that keyword research done for your niche on Pinterest. And like I said, I just do my keyword research right on Pinterest. So back to these keywords and how you're going to implement them. Let's say you've done your keyword research, you've watched my other YouTube episode about how to do that in-depth keyword research, and now you're ready to start applying these keywords. That has to be the first step, because since Pinterest is a visual search engine, those keywords are how you are going to get connected with the perfect audience, the audience that you have the solution to their problem. So you are going to use your keywords to optimize your profile and all of your content that you're pinning on Pinterest. So get out a list, a notebook, whatever you need to do, and write this down. You are going to want to use keywords in the following places. You're going to want to use it in your profile name. You're going to want to use it in your profile bio, your board titles, your board descriptions, your pin titles, your pin descriptions, the text overlay on your pins, and you can actually even rename your file name. So let's say you go to upload your pin to Pinterest. You can even name that file name and use keywords there. There's also a place that you can add tags to your pin. Now, I do want to share that when you're adding tags to your content, you're going to find that they are a little bit limited. So just try to find the most highly relevant tags. So for example, if I'm uploading a pin to my Pinterest account and I'm trying to optimize that using tags, if I'm sharing Pinterest marketing, when I search in the tags Pinterest marketing, nothing comes up. So I'd have to go a little bit broader, and there's a lot of different marketing topics that do come up. So I would include those marketing topics that are relevant. Now, when you're adding tags, you only obviously want to add highly relevant tags. So just a side note there, when you're thinking about uploading that pin and optimizing that pin using those tags. So once again, those places are so important. The board titles, descriptions, pin titles, pin descriptions, all of those places are so important to use those keywords, because once again, that is how your audience is going to get connected with you. When you optimize your content and your profile for the search engine, that helps Pinterest understand who you are and who you're serving. So your profile can actually surface in search results. So if you're searching for healthy dinner recipes, somebody's profile actually can surface in those search results. So they could click on the search, or they could actually click on somebody's profile. Your boards can actually surface in Google searches, which is so amazing, which is why you want to optimize your Pinterest boards. Your boards can even surface in Pinterest searches as well. So I just can't stress that enough, that this is a huge piece of the puzzle. And when you're thinking about doing this keyword research, I want to share a pro tip. I really want to encourage you to check out the Pinterest Trends tool. I do have another YouTube episode on how to use the Pinterest Trends tool, and I will make sure to link that in this video so that you can refer back to that if you want to check out those trends. Because when you're thinking about the keywords that you want to use, also check out the Trends tool, because what that's going to do, it's going to show you when specific keywords are starting to really take off in search based off of time of year. So obviously certain searches are going to be more highly searched depending on the specific time of year. So for example, I was just helping a student in my Pinterest Manager Academy, and we were talking about the Trends tool, and I said barbecue, that really takes off the end of May and also in July because of people getting ready for Memorial Day, the 4th of July, those holidays where we're outside more, we are grilling. So barbecue is really highly searched. So if you had a client who was a food blogger, for example, or let's say in your Etsy shop, you sold grilling tools, you would want to start pinning those products mid-April to beginning of April to make sure that that content was indexed and saved by Pinterest so that they can show that to people when they are performing those searches, because it's really peaking at the end of May. But like I said, pinners are planners, so they're going to start planning well in advance, before the end of May. So I just wanted to share that pro tip, because when you're doing your keyword research, I do have in my SEO expert workshop, I do have a workshop where I teach how to do keyword research, but then I also provide a document that you could keep those keywords in. You can also add the trends when you'd want to be using those keywords, so you can take it even a step further. And that's only going to help increase the reach of your pins as well. So now that we have talked about how to do keyword research, the next step, and this might seem obvious, and if you're starting from scratch or if you've been on Pinterest, you might already know this, but it needs to be said, you have to have a Pinterest business account. So when you're thinking about marketing on the platform, you actually quite literally have to have a Pinterest business account. And what that does is it unlocks the ability to see analytics, run ads, which even if maybe you never run ads, you still have to have a Pinterest business account. So it unlocks a lot of important features and tools. And as I mentioned, Pinterest actually literally makes you have one if you're going to market on the platform. You can actually convert a personal account to a business account, and it's free and it's super easy to do. It takes essentially 2 clicks of a button and voila, you have a business account. And it doesn't erase anything that was on your personal account, but you are going to want to go ahead and optimize that now for your Etsy shop if you are going to turn that personal account into a business account. So now that we talked about how to do keyword research, that you have to have a Pinterest business account, let's talk about your boards. When you are thinking about creating your boards, and let's say for all intents and purposes, you've already optimized your profile name and your bio. You also want to make sure that you have a cover photo that is essentially telling people the next step you want them to take. So in that cover photo, make sure to optimize that. You can create an optimized cover photo inside Canva, which is really helpful to do. So for example, I tell people to go and check out a specific lead magnet I have. So you could tell people to go and check out your Etsy shop. Then you're going to want to have an on-brand Pinterest profile picture. And now to your boards. If you can see it, I am obsessed with talking about Pinterest. So if I seem excited, I am. So now to your boards. When you're thinking about creating boards for your Etsy shop, and especially if you've had a personal account and you're converting it, you're going to probably want to make secret any boards that are irrelevant to your niche. So the boards that are visible to the public, you're going to want to make sure that those are relevant to your niche, what you're selling in your shop. And I really recommend having at least 10 to 15 boards that are essentially going to serve as content buckets for your products. And maybe you also have a blog. I've worked with multiple Etsy sellers and they kind of diversify. So I had an Etsy shop seller who sold on Teachers Pay Teachers. She sold her digital resources on Etsy. Then she had her own Shopify. And then she had her own website too. So it was really cool because, she was really making sure to take advantage of all places that she could be pushing out her products. But the main place we were actually sending her traffic was to her website. So now that we have created those 10 to 15 niche relevant boards, we are going to make sure that those are optimized, the board title and the board description. I know I mentioned that before, but it's very important to make sure that those are optimized because once again, those can filter not only in Pinterest searches, but also even in Google searches, which is really cool. So now that you have your profile name, your bio, your cover photo, your profile picture, you have your boards optimized, the title, the descriptions, those boards are relevant to your niche. It's time to start creating pins. Now, this is something that this could be a little bit different than what you've been doing before. So I really want to make sure to save some time to explain this well. When you're driving traffic to your Etsy shop, you can do a few different things here. Now, I know I just mentioned a client I had who had TPT products, Etsy shop products, a blog. She owned a Shopify site, so she could even drive people to her own Shopify. She was dividing up her traffic a bit. That's why it's important to think about, okay, where does my traffic convert best? Also, which pins perform best? We really did not drive a lot of her traffic when we were creating those pins for her to Teachers Pay Teachers because they honestly just didn't really perform well. So we did drive some to Etsy, but we actually drove most of her pins to her website and her Shopify because her Shopify site she also owned. So she was able to claim her WordPress site and then also her Shopify. So both of those were her claimed domain. And like I mentioned previously, those pins do typically perform a bit better. However, let's say that you don't have your own website and you have your Etsy shop and you are just going to direct your pins to your Etsy shop. That's okay. That's totally fine. So when we're thinking about creating optimized pins, these same principles are going to apply. But one thing I have occasionally noticed is that when people have their Etsy shop, sometimes, especially if they're not as familiar with Pinterest, they will essentially take products and pin them to Pinterest. But one thing that happens when you haven't created an optimized pin and you've pinned from one platform to another, it's not optimized for the search engine. So the dimensions are off, you don't have the keyword optimized title, description, and so it just doesn't perform as well. So what I would recommend doing, because this is a really important part of the whole Pinterest strategy puzzle, is I would recommend using a platform such as Canva and going in and creating a optimized Pinterest pin. So Pinterest recommends having a 2-to-3 ratio, whereas if you were pinning directly from Etsy, it's not going to be the correct dimensions. It's probably going to look like a square. So you're going to want to have a 2-to-3 ratio, 1000 by 1500 pixels. And if you go to Canva and you type in the search bar Pinterest pin, it's already going to properly format that pin for you. So once you start there, you're going to have the correctly formatted pin. Then you can, of course, and you should add your product images to that pin, but then you can also test. You can try just having pins where your product is all there is on the pin, because a lot of your products speak for themselves. But then I also highly recommend adding text overlay and adding some branding personality to that pin and really testing what performs well. So depending on niches, sometimes if you're doing your keyword research, you'll notice that a lot of pins within your niche don't have text overlay. You can always test that, but I do recommend also creating pins with the text overlay. That allows you to take different angles and hooks as well with your products. And I highly recommend doing that because ultimately, let's say you're only directing pins to your Etsy shop, you don't have a website, you can create multiple pins for one product, and you should. So when you're thinking about having success on Pinterest, you really need to be pinning consistently, and pinning, I really like to say, at least 2 to 3 times a day. Now, it's not that that's a hard and fast rule. Does this mean you can't just pin once a day? No, of course not. You can just pin once a day, and you don't have to be consistent. But the thing is, it's really better to pin a little bit more volume. Like I mentioned, at least 2 to 3 times a day, even 3 to 5 times a day. However, the important part is definitely to be consistent, because Pinterest is an amazing platform. And what's so fantastic about it is you might not see results right away. And actually, I'm so glad that comes up, because it's very typical to take 3 to 6 months or even 6 months to a year to really see results on the platform, because it is a search engine. It takes time for Pinterest to index your content, to understand what your content is about, and then who to show that content to. So if you can give Pinterest a little bit more volume to work with, it just helps kind of speed up that process a little bit. Now, it does get to a point where you also don't want to go overkill and be doing 20, 30 pins a day, because sometimes that can look a little bit spammy, especially if you haven't been consistent in the past or you're just getting started. So don't go overkill. Just start slow and steady, see what you can be consistent with, and especially when you're thinking about your Pinterest strategy with your Etsy shop. A couple more things I want to mention with these pins. I really recommend creating a combination of both static or standard image pins and also video content. I really believe that video content is not optional anymore, especially in 2024 and beyond, because people love video content. We see that on Instagram Reels, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, even Reels being shared on Facebook. People love to watch video content. It just hooks them and captivates them in a different way. So I really believe that you need to have diversity with your content. That means both static or standard images and then also the video content. And when you're thinking about how many times a day you're pinning and thinking about how many products you have, like I mentioned, you can create multiple pins for one product. But I really want to stress that if you are creating 3 to 5 pins for one product, that you space that out. So if you have one unique image that you've designed, that if you are pinning another pin to that same product or collection, that you space that out, I would say at least a week. You could do more. And it's not that you're going to get banned for spam if it's 3 days apart, but it's just better to think about sharing your products through a slow drip. So you can think of like turning on a faucet and just slowly dripping that content out rather than a fire hose of just putting out the same product over and over again. That appears spammy. So I just want to stress that and having that slow drip. So hopefully that also gives you a little peace of mind too when you think that, oh, I can actually create multiple pins for one product. You can also drive pins to your collections. And one thing I want to mention, because I did mention that it is a best practice to optimize the text overlay, the title, the description. If you are directing a pin to a direct product, not a collection, but a product, it is most likely going to pull that metadata from your Etsy shop. So whatever the product name and the description on Etsy, it's actually going to pull that for the pin on Pinterest. So if you're optimizing the title and the description, you might be a little bit wasting time because it is going to pull that metadata. A lot of times, because it feels weird to just upload it and have it, the title and description, it actually a lot of times will prompt you like you have to add this before you can publish it out. You could just have a pre-written title and description and you can just know that it's going to ultimately pull that metadata, but I did want to mention that. Now that doesn't happen if you're directing pins to collections. So just something to keep in mind. When you have that website, that place that you actually own, it's so amazing because you can nurture people, like I mentioned, through your blog. You can also get people on your email list where you can continue to stay in touch with them, let them know about future sales. And ultimately, there is a bit more safety in having your own domain because at the end of the day, these platforms we don't own, and I don't know how common it is, to be totally honest, to have your Etsy shop shut down. I actually have had a couple of people tell me that in the past, but it is nice to have your own real estate. And what I mean by real estate is your website and also your email list. That is where I am constantly staying in touch with my audience. And if you don't have a blog, even if you're just building your email list, that's a place where you can continually stay in touch with people. And even if you don't sell products on your website, but you have an email list, you can also let them know when you have new drops or new things released on your Etsy shop. So I just had to put my 2 cents in about that because it's actually something I want to say. I don't regret any part of my business journey because I really believe that all things happen for a reason and all of our journeys are special and unique in their own way. But I will say, if I would have started my email list a little bit sooner, it would be interesting to see where I'd be now. I do wish maybe a little bit that I would have started that sooner. However, I am so thankful that I have that place where I can talk to my audience, I can nurture them, I can share valuable information with them, with also not just selling to them, but because we do have that relationship, they also do want to know about how I can continue to serve and educate them through my products. Which, speaking of, if you want to learn more about my products, I do have a signature course called Pinterest Marketing Magic, which is totally comprehensive in helping you create that Pinterest strategy that will work for your shop. Of course, I gave you a lot in this video or this episode, but that is just another way to further your Pinterest education. So I will make sure to link that in this episode as well. So I am going to wrap this up. Let me know what questions you have. I tried to kind of give you a crash tutorial and I hope that you found it helpful. So like I said, let me know in the comments what questions you have. Be sure to subscribe to my episode and I can't wait to see you soon in next week's episode. Bye for now, friends.